and not at all confident. Gate 24A. I suddenly realized that I had let myself in for a very difficult task. Without thinking much, I, as a member of the Queen family, by now indeed a member of the inner circle, had of course raced to the not exactly nearby hotel reception as soon as I received the fax and had called the London Queen office on a landline to inform Julie Nash I'm coming to London immediately. Gate 24 at last. I dropped onto one of the completely empty benches. No one there but me. Frankly, I was scared shitless. Very much so. All the embassies had issued a warning not to fly. Everyone seemed to follow this instruction, but me, except me. I flew with British Airways, one of the main targets for terrorist attacks in relation for the attack on Iraq. I had booked economy class, Jim Beach's voice always in my ear, with his saying, if you look after the penny, the pound looks after itself. Pick your seat, said the stewardess in her British Airways uniform with a smile. You are the only one. I looked around, there was indeed no other passenger on the entire plane. A really uneasy feeling took hold of me. 9 hours of flying with anxiety in the seat beside me, I tried to distract myself. Before my hasty departure, I quickly had the lyrics of the song printed out at the hotel reception, so I could write down a few ideas of the video on the plane. The sheet filled up, and at some point I got used to the empty plane. If it had to be now, I was even looking forward to the meeting. I loved the creative ping pong with Freddie and was well prepared. Arriving in London, I was picked up as always by a driver with a limousine from Queen Productions. This time, however, I was not going to my hotel, usually to the Cambridge Court, around the corner, but to Freddie's home, Logan Place. I rang the bell. Peter, Phoebe, Freestone, friendly as always, opened the gate and said with his British elegance, he's waiting for you. Freddie impatiently waiting for me and pacing like a tiger in the huge living room of his house. Come on in, Rudy, he said urgently, but friendly. I'm glad that you go. I'm glad that you could come. Listen. And then he explained to me that he didn't really like the idea with the robot. There is no emotion in it, he said. Bingo, I thought. That's exactly how I felt about this as well. Freddie took out from his bookshelf a photo book with black and white pictures of film stars of the 1920s and 1930s. Marlene Dietrich, great lighting, very hard contrast, captivating at first sight. I want the whole video shot like this, Rudy, Freddie said. What do you think? I didn't think for a second. Great. Freddie became friendly and Freddie began to gush. I had long since gone my notepad in my hands and I was writing down. And Freddie continued, pacing in circles in his living room, but now more like a lecturing professor. We have to have a penguin in with the video. Brian loves penguins. I had to laugh. Now, my work on the plane was paying off. Creative ping pong was in full swing. Idea after idea, some a bit over the top, many cool in between. We listened to the song over and over. Phoebe assisted as sound engineer for turning on and off, pausing, rewinding. I sensed something very special was in the making there. Write it down, Freddie kept saying, speaking as if in trance. Then he paused for a moment and he called out like a flourish, we need a gorilla costume. He began to laugh. I have a very special idea with that. A few days later, "Don't you think the couch is too long, Rudy?" Freddie said, already fully dressed in the costume of the mad professor as a comic character that would later become so famous, and pointed to the huge couch. "I don't think so, Freddie," I replied. We were standing in London's Limehouse Studios in February 1991. It had barely been 10 days since Freddie had brought me back from my holiday in Kenya. True, little time had passed since the first conversation and the new final concept for the video, "I'm Going Slightly Mad." But very much had happened. Fred and I had developed a completely new idea, based on his inspiration of the stylistic reference to black and white photography of the 30s, reminiscent of a photograph of Marlene Dietrich shot by photography legend George Harrow. It was in his book, Harrow's Hollywood Portraits, that triggered everything between Freddie and me for the new concept. And days later, here we were in the studio, Freddie and I, having the last director's meeting. And you saw that now a little bit in the video. The idea is, I explained to the band and my team, "Everybody listen up, please." My first assistant director, Barry Wasserman, ensured silence in the studio with a roar. The idea is that when Freddie moves over the couch, all three of you move away, because he's obviously mad. Freddie actually didn't want to go in front of a camera before that shoot. He changed his mind, was oil manager Jim Beach said in the run-up. But then there was this idea, this brilliant idea, that would make this video very special. For the first and only time, Freddie and I tried to find the cinematic equivalent for each line of the lyrics, with a witty sense that either interpreted, exaggerated, or took an amusing look at the lyrics. It was to be a cross between a living cartoon character as the mad professor, as I used to call it, much to Freddie's amusement. "I'm not really that crazy," he said during the concept meeting in his house. But the lines, "I'm going slightly mad," were of course expressions of how he felt. Freddie and I ran through the scene on the long couch once more with Roger, Brian, and John. And it was important to him that the other three were on board with that somehow different video, not to have to change the concept in pointless discussions and thereby dilute it. Here, for example, the idea with the penguin. Brian loves penguins, Freddie explained to me in his house. I want him to be happy too. End of lunch break, my beloved Barry Wasserman, the best first assistant director in the world, was at it again with an honor, with a sonorous and loud voice, bringing the whole team, surely over 30 women and men, back to the film set. Next up, the scenes with the gorilla. I announced to my team as Freddie stood close to me. "Oh yes," he said, with a very cheeky grin, "our very special guest." Winked at me and disappeared down the corridor to the dressing rooms. "Rudy, come," he called me to his direction, and we walked. We both have to say hi to our gorilla friend. There was this persistent rumor within the team that a very famous friend of Freddie had agreed to take the role of the gorilla, as a gag for rock history to speak. The idea was not so wrong, because on the one hand, everybody knew that Freddie was very good friends with Rod Stewart, David Bowie, and in particular Elton John, and that they are truly, the three would be probably up for such a joke. On the other hand, it was not so wrong to suspect that this video might be the last of Freddie and would have a special guest make quite legitimate. During the entire shoot of the gorilla scenes, it was impossible for the team and everyone present to determine who was behind the gorilla mask. Even when the gorilla's head falls off in the final scene, the person in the costume remained unidentified. Afterwards, Gorilla, Freddie and I disappeared back in the gorilla dressing room. Apart from Freddie and me, there were only Barry Wasserman, the two helpers from the costume department, to assist our gorilla, who was by then sweating terribly out of his sick costume. And now, the gorilla was, sorry darlings, please forgive me tonight, it will remain Rudy's secret until the book is out.